Live again. So, hello everyone. In this video, I wanted to answer a question from one of the subscribers I have called 10. And they asked about making your own production application. And I think it's a really good question about if you're interested in making a production application, how on earth do you even get started doing so? Um, Now, there's many considerations that could go into here, but I want to keep it fairly brief. And if there are any other questions, feel free to ask. But what is a production application from the beginning? I mean, let's say anything that you push to the web that can be accessible on the web via HTTP is technically in production. It's not on your local development environment or in some staging environment that only certain individuals can access. Generally, it's something that anyone can access. So it's been pushed to production. I guess staging is technically in a production environment as well in some cases. But the thing being here is it's not necessarily what I'm talking about is anything in production, but it's actually something that's got real world users and has, let's say, value in the real world. Because there's a ton of apps out there that we all make when we're learning that are really good exercises in teaching us about web development and problem solving and the web. But they're toy apps, what you call toy apps. And toy seems kind of maybe it downplays the amount of work going into them. But at the end of the day, you're the only user. The only time it gets used is when you're testing it in development or you're showing your friends and family or some people on a Discord forum what you've made. But it doesn't really get used or tested to its limits. You don't get all the edge cases coming through. And for that reason, I think there's limitations on toy apps. And depending on who you are and how you approach toy apps, you could be a really fastidious, diligent, conscientious developer who considers all the edge cases, and you build a toy app like you would any production application that's going to go and get used in the real world. But is that realistic? Is everybody doing that? Probably not. I think when we make toy apps, me included, you sometimes take some shortcuts or you think, oh, no one's really going to use this, so I'm not too worried about that. And that's where the limitations are on these toy apps. And that's where I think the value of a real world production app shines. In summary, I think a production application with real world users is a fantastic differentiator, like I've said many times before, between you and your competition, because it shows that you've taken an idea through all the way to completion, or at least a working MVP that's providing value on the web. And what that does is it shows a recruiter or even a hiring manager, a developer, an engineer, it may be, who's hiring you. It shows them that your code probably works, because these people don't have time to go in and check your code base or check your app. They may have a brief, they may spend 30 seconds of it. Anytime I've shown people my app, they may have spent at most a minute or two on the application. They're not going to go look at the code base, right? They're busy people. But the fact that it's in a real world situation means that, okay, this code probably works, right? And so that's a key differentiator. But I think first off, you've got to ask yourself, why do you want to make a production application? Is it because you want to differentiate yourself from your competition? Is it because you have a burning idea that you really want to put out there and add value to the world through? Are you learning? Is it a way to stretch your skill set and learn additional things about web development and managing applications in the real world? I think first off, that's the first question you ask is, why do you want to build an application? Because it's a ton of work. It's a lot more work than building a toy app, right? For the reasons that I just mentioned before. But I think it's a really good showcase of skills. I think it shows tenacity, because you're willing to see a problem from the beginning all the way through to the end. I think it shows very strong problem solving skills, because you're taking a real world situation, right? And you are developing a solution in code to that situation. It's not just a prompt or a case that's given to you in an exercise that may have been maybe an iteration on some other exercise that's online, and it may not be novel, it may not be original, right? Um, and for that reason, I think these exercises do have limitations. Whereas a real world application that's based on a real world problem, well, every real world problem is unique and individual. So writing the code for that shows you've had to think, and that you've come up with a working solution. So I think that's an amazing skill or outcome of creating such an application. I've got my notes here I'm referring to. So working with a client is another big one. Assuming that you're building this application for a client, even then, if you're not building it for a client, you're building it for someone, right? Assuming you're going to have end users. You might be the end user, but then you're thinking about yourself in the future and what you need from this application as well. But generally, you're building these applications for somebody, and showing that you can consider somebody else's viewpoint, thinking about not only the back end logic of what they need, but also how it may look and function and feature on the front end is really important as well. And you can demonstrate those skills. And also just working with someone, managing expectations, understanding their needs, right? Because people aren't even always that clear in telling you what they need. You have to sometimes coach that conversation along to figure out what exactly the core problems are in their domain, so that you can kind of lay it all out and understand the problem in a way that you can write code around it. What else is there? Commitment, completion, I mentioned. Yeah, so another reason for writing these apps is you kind of get to learn about the full breadth of, assuming you're writing a full stack application, you get to learn about and showcase the full breadth of full stack knowledge, right? Yes, it may be limited knowledge. You may be maybe a simple application. However, in doing so, you are showing, okay, you can think about backend, you can think about front end, as well as testing. I highly recommend adding testing, test suite to it. Trade-offs, right? Because you're on a short amount of time. You can't build, Rome overnight. You're going to have to make trade-offs. You're going to have to decide which features to include, which features to exclude, and the reasons for that. DevOps, that's another thing you don't get too much exposure to on your toy apps, but if you want to have a CI pipeline through GitHub Actions, for example, if you're going to manage contributors, maybe you're making this thing open source and you have a couple of buddies or other people online that you know who are going to contribute to it. You get exposure to managing contributions as well as continuous integration. That's another great kind of skill that you will not get with a toy app. Production maintenance. While this thing is in production, you might be getting notifications of issues that are arising out downtime or slow response times or something like that. You've got to look into that and see if there's any issues on that. Hey, Philippe, I'll get to your question in just a sec. I'm just going through this one last bullet point here. There's a ton of reasons to build a production app that I think it's not easy, right? All of these considerations are not easy because the toy app is just so much more simple. But that's why a production app is going to set you apart from all of your competitors. And that's kind of how you see it, right? You are in a competition to get your first job. So Philippe, you said you just started learning your own project how to do testing using RSpec. Yeah, RSpec is a very popular framework in Ruby and Rails as well. I haven't got too much experience with that myself. I've been using the Rails default of Minitest, but I definitely look forward to learning more about RSpec. When deciding on your production application, it's a tough one to figure out what you want to do. There's many different ways you could go about kind of deciding on which application you want to build or what kind of value you want to add. And there's kind of two core ways I could think about. There's kind of the domain area, or there's, let's say, what comes to you through your network. And when I say domain area, you may actually have a specific idea or a specific niche or passion that you already know enough about and are interested in enough about and have an idea that you want to pursue. and turn into a real world application. That's the domain route. You already have an idea. And that's probably, if you have that, that's great. That's probably the best route to go, right? Because you're already passionate about it. You already know about the domain. The other route is going through your network and kind of seeing what falls on your lap. So that's reaching out to friends, family, additional online networks, organizations in your town, for example, who need a website or need a simple web application building. That's another route. That's the route I went. But it kind of fell into the domain area as well. Like it was a dog adoption application, and I adopted a dog, realizing the people I got it from needed an application. But it was also something I was really passionate about, so that helped. So they're kind of the two routes you can go. And the domain side, that's really going to be individual. I'd just say whoever is interested in going that route, go for it. On the networking side, I think you just got to be able to push yourself out there, and let people know, and be persistent. Let people know, and don't just give up on the first kind of email or mention to a friend. Really just plan out how you would. You can go to ChatGPT, say, look, I want to build an application. Give me a little plan on how to do an outreach plan on my different networks to canvas people who might need an application. A lot of people are busy. But you will find that one that needs this, has been thinking about it, and you're kind of the answer for a prayer, right? When you come into their inbox or whatever. So that's another route that you can go. I want to keep this shorter here. Some main tips I'd have for building an application is keep it simple. Keep it really, really simple. At this stage, if you're earlier on in your development career, you're still learning. There's a lot to learn, and a lot to know, and a lot to understand. Just building an application that people are going to use by itself is going to be a stretch, even if it's simple. So don't chase glory. My recommendation is don't chase money. Don't chase fame. A lot of people, especially years ago, had their app idea. They're going to go big. They're going to go massive, right? It rarely happens. Really, rarely happens that way. And especially as your first app, it's not going to be that great, probably. Enough for people to really want to pay for it. So for that reason, I would suggest finding a domain or a niche where you would be building this for free without the expectation of receiving any money. That's the route I went, because it took a lot of the pressure off of me as a developer to build something that I thought was a good product, but there wasn't that extra reliance or dependence on me to build something quickly or better because I was getting paid for it. I think that adds an additional level of stress to the whole project. So do something free, like either offer your services for free. That is a debatable topic, but either offer them for free or build it better yet, build it for a domain where there's usually volunteer work or free work done, whether it's a non-government organization, a volunteer organization, a charity, or something like that. Then in that space, there is less of an expectation of really high standards around time and quality, right? You obviously want to build it as well as you can and as timely as you can, but just take that level of stress off of your head from the beginning. I think is a really valuable approach. I have had a couple situations, just learning from experience, where I entered into doing contract work for someone where there was money on the line, and it does make things way more stressful. And the chances are you might find someone who asks for a lot more than is reasonable and realistic too. So I think it's very important that you set scope and expectations very early in the project. I think it's very important to have a kickoff meeting with your client where you understand together what the problem is. Well, first off, they need to give you a dump of information so you can get a sense of what the domain area is and what the problem that you're trying to solve is. And then you go away and then you come back and schedule another meeting and you say, okay, this is what I understand to be the problem and this is what I propose to be the solution. And you really manage scope very, very carefully and with intent in that meeting. Write it down, put it in an email, put it in a chart, whatever it needs to be, so that both of you have read it and you understand that these are the expectations, and set some timelines around that as well that are realistic for you. That's going to take a ton of the burden off of you as well while you're developing. There's nothing worse than feeling like you're under pressure and having somebody whose expectations are different from yours. And usually that is a result of unmanaged expectations and scope. So I think that conversation really early on is really important. You're going to find out all of these kind of challenges that come along with doing this kind of work for people. You're basically consulting, and whenever you're consulting, there's always challenges. And I think that would be a really good experience. Just so it happens to be that it's in the web development domain. Either way, I think this will be a great way to get your foot in the door and differentiate yourself. And I know for sure that's what helped me get my first developer role, was the fact that I had built a production app that I could, during the interview, send the URL to the engineering manager who's interviewing me and passionately discuss this project, and they were impressed. And I think that was a clincher for me. And then that got me my first 8 months experience that then helped me get my next job. So it is that foot in the door, I think. But stay really simple and manage those expectations early on. The simpler the better, because once you get into it, it will get more complex, guaranteed. So keep it super simple. Yeah, I've rambled on here a lot longer than I intended to, so I'm going to sign off now. But if you have any questions, please do throw them down below, and I'll do another video where I just throw up some of my ideas and opinions on the question. Thanks, Philippe, for signing in, and take care.